The topic of this lecture is Mr. Lu Dadao's pole axis theory. This lecture is mainly divided into 4 parts: the background and the proposal of the theory, the basis and source of the theory, the contents of the pole axis theory, the application and influence of theory. Now, let's move on to the first part, the background and the proposal of the theory. Since the founding of New China, there has been 3 strategic shifts in land development and economic layout. From the 1950s to the 1970s, China's land development and regional economic development were mainly guided by the Western Balanced Regional Development Theory and the former Soviet Union's Regional Production Complex Theory. And the first and second strategic shift of land development and economic layout were carried out under this context. The first strategic shift refers to the preferential concentration of key industrial projects in the central and western regions in the 1950s and 1960s. The second strategic shift refers to a large-scale national defense, science and technology industry, and transportation infrastructure and construction in the Third Front area, mainly 13 provinces and autonomous regions in central and western China in 1960s and 1970s. The above-mentioned 2 strategic shifts, to some extent, promoted the industrial construction and economic development of the central and western regions, improved the unbalanced industrial layout in the coastal and the inland areas. In the early days of reform and opening up, China decided to set up pilot special economic zones in coastal areas such as Shenzhen, Zhuhai, Xiamen, and Shantou, and put a large number of major engineering projects into coastal and riverfront areas, which was the third strategic shift in China. This strategic shift has provided a strong driving force for China's economic development and a strong guarantee for China's modernization construction. While greatly liberating and developing social productivity, it has also helped China transform into a prosperous and strong industrially developed economy. On the other hand, due to the rapid economic development in the East, its gap with the central and western regions is gradually widening. Therefore, by the mid-1980s, China was faced with these 2 extremely challenging problems. Can the coastal areas, which had just opened up and started to develop, continue to be the strategic focus of the country's development? And where is the focus of further opening up and development? Under this historical background, in October 1984, at a national symposium on national economic geography and territorial planning in Urumqi, Lu Dadao put forward his theoretical model of pole axis system in the report named 2000 Scientific Basis of China's General Industrial Layout. Now let me give you an introduction and an analysis on the theoretical basis and source of the pole axis theory. The theoretical basis of Lu Dadao's pole axis theory is the growth pole theory, growth axis theory, and central place theory. First, let's take a look at the growth pole theory. French economist Perrault proposed the growth pole theory in 1956. The main point of the theory is that balanced development for a country is only an ideal instead of a reality. The development of regional economy mainly depends on the leading role of a few areas with good conditions and a few industries. Therefore, regions with good location conditions and industries with good conditions should be cultivated as economic growth poles. Growth axis theory is a regional planning theory proposed by German scholars in the early 1960s, represented by Werner Sombart. The main content of the growth axis theory is that the construction of traffic trunk line will form a new favorable location. The new transportation trunk lines are attractive to industry and labor force, forming a favorable investment environment. Therefore, industry and population converge on the transportation trunk lines, creating new industrial areas and residential areas. With the traffic line becoming the main axis, an industrial belt will gradually be formed. And the traffic trunk line is the growth axis, derived from the industrial belts. German urban geographer Christaller and German economist Losch put forward the central place theory in 1933 and in 1940. The central place theory explains the basic process of spatial agglomeration and spatial diffusion of social and economic objects, and reveals the grade-scale rule of the formation of residential areas and cities. The central place theory deduces the forming process and forming mechanism of the city hierarchy, which lays the theoretical foundation for the systematic development of regional economy. Now, let's move on to the content of Lü Dao's pole axis theory. From the perspective of the process of regional economic development, the economic centers are always concentrated in a few places with good geographical conditions and scattered like spots. This kind of economic center can be called not only regional growth pole, but also the pole in the pole axis development mode. With the development of economy and the increasing of economic centers, and the exchange of production factors requires transportation lines and energy supply lines. Many poles are connected with these lines to form the axis. Although the axis serves for the regional growth pole in the first place, once formed, it is also attractive to the population and industry. The population and industry will converge on both sides of the axis under this attraction, and eventually generate new growth poles. The connection of the poles and axis leads to the formation of the pole axis system. Therefore, pole axis development can be taken as a process of development from large and small-scale economic centers, poles, in developed regions, along the traffic lines to underdeveloped regions. The formation process of the pole axis spatial system mentioned above implies the formation mechanism of the pole axis system theory, which is the inevitable spatial agglomeration and spatial diffusion in the economic operation of social objects. The formation of poles is due to the need of spatial agglomeration. The agglomeration effect can affect the concentration of factors in the region, so as to obtain scale effect and positive externality. However, spatial agglomeration is not always efficient. When the externalities of agglomeration gradually take the leading position, spatial diffusion becomes an inevitable choice. Spatial agglomeration and diffusion always go both ways. Only by giving full play to the scale effect and agglomeration effect and paying attention to spatial correlation and spatial diffusion can the utilization of social and economic resources achieve the best systemization and the best scale. Pole axis progressive theory is the application and extension of spatial agglomeration and spatial diffusion in pole axis theory, and is also the key to forming pole axis spatial pattern. The pole axis progressive diffusion is the key to forming the pole axis spatial pattern because it conforms to the objective law and the spatial movement of the productive forces. Under normal circumstances, the process of diffusion is neither flat nor large span jump. It is progressive and carried out in the following three models. What these three models have in common is that the diffusion of poles decreases progressively as the range expands and the distance increases. The pole axis development mode based on pole axis theory has the following 6 advantages. 1. Give play to the agglomeration effect. 2. Give full play to the role of central cities at all levels. 3. Achieve the best spatial combination between industrial layout and linear infrastructure. 4. conducive to organic regional economic network. 5. Improve the effectiveness of capital investment. 6. Improve the management and organization level. At last, I will introduce the application and influence of the pole axis system theory. T-shaped strategy. The most important application result of pole axis spatial theory has been included in National Land Planning, which was put in to national trial in 1987. The so-called T-shaped development strategy means the coastal area and the Yangtze River corridor are taken as the strategic focus of China's land development and economic layout, and it is shown in the picture. Pole axis system theory has been widely used in the comprehensive regional development and in development strategy planning research, the practice of comprehensive regional development and development planning. Especially in 2013, China's President Xi Jinping put forward the strategic conception of building the Silk Road Economic Belt, which has drawn a new round of attention on the strategic value of the pole axis system theory in China's academia. The Northwest Silk Road Economic Belt, Northeast Liaoning Economic Circle, Southwest Tibet, Yunnan, Sichuan, Chongqing, and the Eastern Yangtze River Delta are examples of the application value of the pole axis system. Thank you.